So, welcome everybody to this alumni panel on the role of AI in their work, careers, and industry. This is the very first time we are running this program. The world of AI is something new for a lot of us in the past several years, and I was really excited the idea of pulling together this panel. Thrilled to have our alumni coming to us literally from around the globe. One of our alum is coming to us 1 o'clock in the morning, Rosa, in Korea, and Maggie is coming to us from London right now. So really thrilled by this opportunity to hear from them about how AI is impacting their work. So I'm going to ask them each to do an introduction about themselves, their career path, and talk about a little bit right now about the role of AI in their work, and then we will open it up to questions. Rosa, since you are coming to us at 1 o'clock in the morning, you get to go first.
Oh no, I'm the sleepiest person in this room. So, and then, okay, so I'm gonna go first. And first, it's so good to see you, Professor Bill Adams, again. And hi, everyone. And my name is Rosa, and I am currently working for the Center for AI and Social Policy at Korea Information Society Development Institute. So we call it KISTI. So basically, KISTI is a government-affiliated research institute in Korea, and we are closely working with the department, the Ministry of Science and ICT in Korea. So basically, like today, I want to. I'm not necessarily AI is making my work different compared to like a few like years ago, but my work is more associated with the AI and the societal impact itself. So let me like first give you some background about myself. I graduated a PhD program in 2019, majoring in urban and social policy. So my current work, my team is mainly looking for the public policy approach for negative social phenomenon that may occur in future society, mainly focusing on bias, privacy issue, accountability, and social impact of AI technologies. So our role is connect many key players in AI ecosystem in Korea, including the government in AI industry and some of the big tech working in Korea, like Google, IBM Korea, or the Microsoft, and academics in Korea. And one example like of the work output would be the national guideline for AI ethics, which was announced in 2020. So it like for this work, my team and our team work for like mainly hold so many workshops and bringing experts from the everywhere, industry, civil society, and academics, and to deliver the final output for the presidential committee on the fourth industrial revolution. So like I wanna. Another thing was like last year we were working on the Korean government like project for the bringing the educational material for K-12 students, especially regarding AI ethics. So that was very rewarding project in from my side. Although I'm not an educator, but at the same time, just letting the young student know what's the AI ethics field, and then what's the problem, and then what we can do about it. And that's very rewarding in time-consuming projects. But we talk about the three major principle and then 10 key elements. Like I think I better give you the website link that my team was working on, and it's in English, luckily. So anyone who is interested in that national guideline for AI ethics in Korea, they can check out this website. And I would like to, I want to speak about like many things, but I would like to let other speakers speak first, and then I'll come back. Like, is that okay, Denise?
Fantastic. That's perfect. Jennifer, I'm going to go over next to you.
Sure. Thank you, Denise. And hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining in from. I'm Jennifer Wong. I am a global business strategist, operations executive, and an entrepreneurial leader in the health data, digital, and AI space for life sciences, and most specifically right now in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm a proud alumni of GW. I was a part of the class of 2014 cohort for Masters of Public Policy. So I had the privilege of knowing Denise from back then. I attended Professor Bill Adams' class back then as well. And so I credit a lot of my success to being in the DC community, learning from GW and building upon that to be where I am today professionally and personally. So my professional track record spans both in the nonprofit space as well as in the private sector. And I've always been at the intersection of working on science, business, public policy, and bringing together different teams in enabling innovation and outcomes in a variety of different ways in the healthcare space. So currently, excuse me. So currently I serve at Sanofi. I'm the VP and Global Head of R&D Data and Data Sciences. And so for the past 3 years, I've worked with senior leadership teams and our data science and AI experts, both internally and externally, to help the company develop our long-term vision of how to leverage AI and data science across the R&D pipeline and portfolio. As you might imagine, the time that it takes to really discover, develop, and bring a medicine to market is really long. It takes a lot of time. It's an incredible amount of cost, and it's just a lot of effort to be able to bring one molecule to the market. So on average, the success rate, especially in this space, is very, very low. For one drug that you see on the market now, it takes, if it's successful, it takes about 15 years from the first time someone can discover that molecule before it goes through all the clinical trial phases. If it clears all those hurdles successfully, gets into the hands of a patient eventually. So on average, for something to be successful, it takes 15 years and over $1 billion or $2 billion for that to happen. So from an AI and data science perspective, we're trying to see how we can leverage the latest technologies, leverage statistics, build different algorithms, and build partnerships to be able to accelerate this process and just even as much as we can incrementally improve the probability of success of bringing these things to market so that patients all over the world can benefit from it. So this panel actually comes at a really interesting time. So as of next week within Sanofi, I'll be taking on a broader role. So in addition to having built up an expertise in R&D, I'll be taking more of an enterprise-wide view, serving as a global program leader for generative AI initiatives. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, I'd love to dig a little bit deeper later on. But also, as Rosa alluded to before, ethics and trust in AI is incredibly important. And so also in addition to my role, I'll be serving as a Chief Responsible AI Officer, ensuring that our colleagues are aware of what AI is, that our company-wide digital initiatives are trustworthy, they're ethical, they're safe, they're accountable to our patients and our stakeholders, and ultimately that these programs will be compliant with a lot of the regulations that will be coming down, impacting different companies in the space. So again, thank you again, Denise, for inviting me to this panel, and I look forward to the conversations that we have the rest of the hour. So
fantastic. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Maggie coming to us from London is next.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So before I say anything, I have to say what I say today is mine and my opinions and my comments alone. They don't represent the United States government, the Department of Defense, or the United States Army. And with that out of the way, I'm good to go. So I'm an Army officer and have been for almost 20 years. That comes up this summer. And in 2020, so we must have crossed paths, Rosa, at some point. I finished my PhD from GW, and I was in the public management field, but really took a different approach to it and did a lot of the work that I did in my dissertation was on counterterrorism and looking at the Islamic State in particular. And in my current role, I work as I guess the catch-all term is an Army strategist. But really, I'm focused on looking at the latest technology, and that's going to come down the pipe in about 5 to 10 years, as well as human and machine teaming, which, as you can imagine, for defense, the last thing you want is to get on the short end of the stick when it comes to the technology fight. So working with our national labs and our national labs, plus like the Army has Army Research Lab, which is actually in Adelphi, Maryland, right up the road from DC, and doing a lot of nerding out with scientists. And so it applies to the robotic side of things, because we need to understand the best ways to pair machines on the battlefield. And right now, there's very limited ways to figure out, when you're dealing with swarms or dealing with groups or squads, as we call them, of machines, how, if, say, there's one machine that's kind of guiding the rest of the team of machines, what happens if that machine is taken out? And so if you have that taken out, what do you do with the orphans? So we have this really interesting ongoing research that is looking at figuring out ways to bring greater technology to the battlefield while still enhancing survivability for the soldier, or Marine or Airman, sailor, whatever. So that's a really interesting aspect of my work. The other part of it is I also, I'm really in the intelligence field. And so a lot of intelligence is turning towards AI and generative AI in order to help us figure out what's going on in time and space. With the proliferation of the amount of data that we collect based on just how many things are producing data these days, or how many devices are connected to the internet, and the exponential growth of machines around the globe, it really requires some help in order to sift through a lot of the data that is collected to find the pieces of information that you need in order to give them to a decision maker to drive policy, but also strategy. And so AI is becoming further and further incorporated into the intelligence world to help sort through the astronomical amount of data that we do receive. And so that is another interesting aspect, to see how military intelligence and intelligence on the Title 50 side of US code, like CIA, FBI, any of those, are really leveraging AI in order to better improve the ability to give decision makers the key information that they need in order to make those decisions in a timely manner. And there's nothing good about intelligence if you can't action the intelligence. And so that's really what is driving a lot of those efforts. And then lastly, I also teach for the University of Maryland, so I moonlight as an adjunct. And so there's been a huge initiative at that university to incorporate AI into the classroom in a more meaningful manner. So encouraging students and rethinking syllabi in order to incorporate AI-driven assignments. So meaning, instead of having students write an essay, in some way figuring out how to make it acceptable for I guess make it acceptable, part of, acceptable is the wrong word. I'm trying to think of how to say this. I'm a little tired, but how to encourage students to both use AI, but in a responsible manner, so that it's not like they're having their homework done for them, which obviously is kind of the knee-jerk reaction to a lot of the generative AI, is that students are going to cheat, which I think is a fallacy. But figuring out ways to incorporate it, some of the tools into your syllabi planning, so that your students are having to use it, so that you're beginning to help them build the skill sets that they're going to need to enter the workforce. Because if you decide to be a Luddite and ignore it, then all you're doing is not helping your students figure out how AI is fitting into that subject that you're teaching. So that was a lot of words, and it's a lot, but I'm here to take questions, and excited to hear more from the other speakers as well, because I know nothing about your field, so I'm really excited to learn about them.
My head is already, this is amazing, fascinating. Kenneth, let's bring it over to you.
Ken Stibler. I was an MPA in International Development and Economic Policy, but I got recruited to go build an AI company 2.5 years before GPT. And so I like to joke that when I started that gig, I couldn't spell AI, and it scared me to death, which I think is more akin to how a lot of people feel right now. But over 2 years leading up strategic intelligence, basically for an organization that worked with the defense and intelligence community and pharma and finance. So I've touched in a lot of different sectors about how AI is, and more importantly, is not being used in some places. And so that was acquired last year, and after that, I started the Center for Emerging Economies, which is my passion has really been in emerging markets and in development economics. And so I was able to kind of bridge the two. And so right now I manage a 20-person team roughly globally of researchers, economists, and data scientists working on oftentimes how AI can help or hurt emerging economies and how do we respond to that. And so just an example of kind of the three tiers or the three levels at which we work with AI. At the personal level, when I'm managing folks or when my project managers are managing folks, if they're not using AI tools in what they're doing, they're failing. Doesn't matter how good their projects are. Because at this point, and I have a data science team that scraped over 15,000 open source tools. Every single thing you're doing could be done more efficiently and more probably better in a real way if AI is being integrated there. And so that's the personal level. I still struggle with this myself, despite being around machine learning engineers that build the tools, despite focusing on it. I'll still find myself manually drafting emails, manually doing a lot of stuff. And so the human adaptation side is where I'm working with my team, and including building out a series of courses that get people out of thinking about code or AI as a language that they need to learn in its entirety. I like to say when you're trying to use Python for something, you don't need to learn it like a language. You're not trying to subjugate. You're trying to learn how to ask for coffee. Then at the organizational level, we have research projects. The way the Center for Emerging Economies works is unlike other think tanks, it's demand driven. All of our research comes out of information requirements from mid-level policymakers, usually in governments around the world, and then sometimes in the US government as well. Basically, it's when there are needs that they can't get met either on the open marketplace because it's too expensive or whatnot. Oftentimes that's the case in emerging markets, or whether there just isn't the budget for it in other organizations, we'll step in and fill that gap. And so we right now we're consulting with a government in Eastern Europe on building them a strategy basically to attract foreign direct investment on data centers and sort of the digital infrastructure that underpins a lot of the stuff underneath AI. And then finally, we do novel data sets and novel data products, whether that's machine learning algorithms that can assess relative investor confidence in a certain market, or one of my favorite ones that I think might be more interesting for the audience, our Authoritarians Technologist Initiative uses our network of technologists across major, tech companies to identify what pieces of emerging tech, whether it be an algorithm or something else, that often sounds really cool, has potentially negative effects on democracies around the world, and producing illicit use cases about how authoritarians might be using that in practice. A lot of the discourse around AI is either it's going to ruin us all, or we're going to be on universal basic income and all doing whatever we want. We recognize that the intermediate effects are probably the more concerning. And then there's often a gap between the people that speak the tech and the people that are in the policy spaces. And we're trying to bridge that gap. Outside of that work, which I'm happy to talk about at any of the levels, whether it's how can nations compete more effectively, or how do societies respond to the externalities, I also invest. I believe deeply that AI is disrupting and will continue to disrupt labor markets. I still do consulting sometimes for businesses, and anybody that tells you that the way AI is going to generate cost savings isn't primarily through labor reduction, as in replacing people, is lying. We're already starting to see that in white collar labor market data. And that scares me, truthfully. I think that's the primary pass-through where AI becomes a massive societal issue in the medium term. And so I invest in startups that are working to make labor markets more effective and to help people upskill quicker.
Oh my goodness. Okay. It's interesting, about to open up with questions. It made me think about when I was doing initial outreach to identify alumni. It was actually, there weren't a huge number of alumni who had this in their LinkedIn profiles. And I would imagine if I do this panel even next year, that the numbers will be in there, or it won't even need to be in there because it's just going to be a part of everything. Or maybe, as Ken was saying, I probably could use AI to do an easier job of finding our alumni. So I want to open it up to questions. As I mentioned, I have questions here that I asked for them to be prepared for, but I would rather take questions from our participants. So does anybody have a question that they would like to start with? Great. Bill, we'll go with you.
First, thank you all so much for participating in this. This was I'm just sitting here with goosebumps listening to you all talk about what you're doing and being so proud of our alumni in doing such fantastic things. And this is really impressive. I'm so glad we're recording it, and I really can envision showing excerpts of this to my classes to kind of inspire them as to the direction things are going and all the exciting things they can do. As Annabelle said, I'm just getting into trying to weave this into our classes at Trachtenberg. Anyway, my quick question. I have just, as I've been using it, I have been shocked at how radically different the answers I get are when I use different apps, different AI apps. Now, I can see you guys are light years ahead of me. So I'm at the really primitive level of somebody just using Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT, and I don't even have the paid version yet. When GW raises my salary, I'll get the paid version. But right now, I'm on the free version, and I'm shocked. And so I'm actually encouraging students to not rely on one AI, because I've gotten sometimes unexpectedly get wildly better answers for my purposes, say with Gemini than with ChatGPT. And then sometimes Copilot has surprised me about how well it's done. So my question I finally get to is, what do you think about that? Is that off base? Is there some, are you putting all your eggs in one basket? How do you deal with this phenomena of these different apps giving some pretty significant differences, I think, in the quality of the feedback that you get, the answers you get?
I would say my initial answer to that is that I never like to think of it as a decisive answer that I'm getting. So so oftentimes I will shop around to get ideas in terms of which platform to use. But I do think it speaks a lot to the, these things are still, they're good, but they're relatively new. And so those, every platform is still in its learning phase, if that makes sense. And so it's only going to improve over time. So I think there'll be a convergence down the road, but when in terms of the data sets that they train off of and then how that gets fed, I think it's going to be different. But it is a good way to get multiple opinions, almost like you're asking friends for opinion on a topic.
I tend to treat it like you're managing people in a, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Ken. Yeah, Ken first. Yeah.
I mean, and Maggie mentioned it, it kind of comes down to the data they're trained on. Everybody's talking about prompt engineering, like the new coding, as in like that's the job that's going to replace it. It's not really. The economics of prompt engineering are not going to support that as a long-term career prospect, but it is a skill everybody's going to need to have. And I think, and I see this a lot with the people, especially the people in master's programs that I'm either mentoring or working with, is that there's an instinct that you need to be super technical to use these tools. The reality is prompt engineering is 10% understanding kind of how the algorithm works at a broad stage. I would say understanding what data is training each of them. Is it coming from Reddit or in the sense of Perplexity, which is, is it trained on more peer-reviewed sources and can you trust it a little bit better? But I tend to treat them almost like members of a group project. And so GPT is the kind of the one that takes charge a little bit, but he's long-winded. You don't really want him on the final deliverable. Perplexity is the one that knows all the sources, and you're going to trust what Perplexity says. And then Claude by Anthropic is the writer. It's much more effective at writing. I write a weekly column on emerging markets, and sometimes Claude's better than what I could put out on certain topics, which is concerning for me, obviously there. But having them used in sort of a collaborative way, as opposed to just thinking of them shopping around for answers, can really help, because just like with students, they're going to have different strengths. And if you can play to their strengths rather than trying to force one into a position that it's not necessarily built for, that's going to be better off. And I'd finally say there was a study, I believe 3 months ago by BCG and Harvard Business Review that found that students actually perform much more effectively when the model is like GPT-3 as opposed to like Claude, the new Claude, basically. The reasoning was when the students knew that it wasn't perfect output, they had to get much more involved in tweaking it. And so for class, using actually less effective models or requiring that they're used like that gets the student more involved and actually led across all of BC or some subset of BCG's consultants to higher output than just if they were using the top tier model or anything else, I believe.
I would like to add on, like Professor Bill, that's really important subject. What we are dealing with, especially we are dealing with the fake news. So what people call the hallucination effect. So basically, like I would suggest to like more younger students, but do not believe what generative AI said. Just you need to research. You need to Google. You need to research it again whether their generative answers are correct or not, because a lot of like this generative AI these days, they make very believable answers, and they sounds very smart, and they of course they can speak better English than me, and but think about this one example. So one people, like this is also before GPT-4, but the GPT around like 3.5, but one person asked GPT, like, describe how crushed porcelain added to the breast milk can support the infant digestive system. And this whole GPT 3.5 was generating a whole like, oh, crushed porcelain added to breast milk can support the infant digestive system by providing a source of calcium and other essential minerals, something like that. So these hallucination effects are what researchers are very worried about. And then even OpenAI researchers are aware of this entire AI community. So their GPT-4 system card, that's a paper. So you can download from their OpenAI paper. So download OpenAI's GPT-4 system card, and there are lay out all the potential challenges they're confronting, including hallucinations, like harmful contents and disinformation and influencing this like a privacy issue, cybersecurity, and a lot of these issues are so because of this kind of hallucination effect, we need to aware of like what GPT says is like not a truth. So like that's why we need to be educated more. We need to be more cautious about why we are using this tool and how we use it.
Yeah, I would just conclude this by saying, like, I think, AI is very exciting to everyone, but it's almost like it's still at the early stages. We don't know the full ramifications of it, and it's almost a little bit like buyer beware. So we always advise our stakeholders to always make sure that there's still a human in the loop, right? You have to be there to be involved, to take a look at it, to validate, to make sure it all makes sense. And so that's why there's so much of a push to be able to make sure that at the end of the day, AI only works based on the underlying data that's there. And so the push to be able to understand what's in the data sets, is it fair? Is it unbiased? Making sure all the processes are transparent. And ultimately, when the field continues to mature, I think we'll have more certainty in sort of the outputs that we see from a lot of these platforms. But in the meantime, I think we leverage these as sort of personal assistants, and then we use our own judgment to make the best to take the best solutions from all of them.
Thank you. This is amazing. I'm going to go. We have a question that came in on the chat, but Alexandra, you had your hand raised first. So we're going to ask your question and then go to the one that came in on the chat for the student who had to leave but wanted the answer recorded. Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry. I said it's still a bit of a continuation of what we're talking about right now. So for example, at KPMG France and in France generally, everyone is talking about AI like it's going to be a lifesaver or anything that will help them. The real issue for most of French companies is that they never compiled their data in a consistent way so that today they could really use AI to power what they want to have as an answer. And even so, for example, if we take project management in tech, most of those projects were not really well designed at the beginning. So the data they have cannot give them an accurate answer of what they need in the future, because they made so many mistakes in the past that they recorded in the data, that the answers for the future will have all those mistakes. So the real question is right now, it's not like what AI can do for you, it's more how can you change your strategy so that how you're compiling your data right now can help you in the near future to try to correct what you're doing. And I don't know if you started, well, you obviously started on this, especially in the US, but in Europe right now, we're light years behind on those questions, and they don't realize.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, from a private sector standpoint, and Alexander, I know that you're a bit more familiar with the organization that I'm coming from right now, but I think what's really critical is to have that top-down leadership and understanding of the importance of data writ large and all the things that come with it. And so companies like ours, especially in healthcare and in highly regulated spaces, we're investing lots of money and resources to being able to clean up data foundations and platforms and all the what they call basically the plumbing of the house, to be able to then get everything ready in order to do anything slightly more advanced or even be able to leverage AI. So yes, in the lay press, in the public, we're talking about AI. It's going to be light years ahead. Everyone has to have that as the competitive advantage. But the companies that are really invested and they have to get this right, they're doubling down on being able to invest in the data, to clean it up, to make sure things are standardized. I know in the US, there's a lot of efforts here. Europe, definitely, I don't know. I think all the corporations are especially anxious right now just because the EU AI Act came out, and there's a time limit, right? So everyone's trying to get all hands on board, hands on deck to be able to do this, and it's a new space. So I think what's really exciting for us to be in this AI/data space is that it's new, but we're all hands on board and we're all going to be able to learn and do this together. And so that's why the communities of practice and the coalitions that we're building with partners, both in the for-profit and not-for-profit space, are so incredibly important, because not one entity is going to have all the answers for all of it. So we really need to be able to leverage expertise across the board.
We have a big problem on the ethics side, obviously, in the military, because there's, everything that we talk about is always labeled as semi-autonomous because of the ethics of having something that's fully autonomous target someone, right? Or an enemy combatant. But if you remove kind of that human element from it and ignore the fact that these are weapons designed to kill, like when you think about targeting, it's a really complicated problem, especially when a lot of the systems that you're building are being built in a classified manner, and they are, the last thing you want is to grab from a database, observations or things, because then you're giving signals that you're grabbing that data, if that makes sense. So where do you get the data when you're trying to test out weapon systems and test out the algorithms and the technology that's going to be driving and powering those weapon systems to make them smart systems? And so we have a massive, how do we get all of the data that we need in order to actually mature this technology to get it to where it needs to be in order to have precision targeting at a time and place of our choosing, and effective manner that minimizes collateral damage. So for us in the military, it's a massive problem. The other challenge that we have is active duty military. We're under Title 10 of the US Code. And so we don't do anything on US soil or US citizens. We can collect on our own service members, that's no problem, but we don't do any collection. That's FBI can only do that, law enforcement on domestically. And so when we think about the ways that we're trying to train AI, we're limited to storing and having data sets that are external to anyone with a US person affiliation, right? And so there's a lot of really interesting policy questions that are being worked on right now, and a lot of very, deep thinking, ethical questions that go into a lot of where the military is going for leveraging AI, especially when you consider bias. I mean, everything about the military has a masculine bias, because war fighting over the centuries has always been a male-dominated domain. And so when you consider like a lot of the research that goes into soldier survivability is going to be biased towards men's body types and that type of stuff. So it's a constant, asking questions and, starting from scratch, but then realizing that, you got to really pay attention to where bias comes in, especially when you're looking at controlled data sets and limited data sets. So it's a persistent problem for us from that perspective too.
I want to get
So
in if
I had the
possible.
opportunity.
Yep. Finish up and then I
go ahead.
want to make sure we get that last question in, but go for it, Ken.
I was just going to say, I had the opportunity to see about a quarter of the Fortune 500's, AI and data science programs. And first of all, AI, it's a joke in machine learning communities that AI only exists on PowerPoint. It's not really real. The class of technologies is so broad as to be, functionally useless as a term, but that's what's being talked about. I'd say the Europeans are a little bit further behind the American counterparts. GDPR, while it led to some good stuff, led to a 70% decrease in venture capital investment the quarter after it went into effect. And so the Europeans are going to struggle a little bit more relative to the Americans. That being said, data is really AI is really like a thin crust over companies. Even in the largest companies, you see everything, the vast majority of what they do, aside from a handful of really public projects so that somebody can say that they're doing something, in my experience, it's still Excel-based. And that data infrastructure does not exist in a way, we're years and years off. Because that work is less connected to ROI and more boring in a lot of cases. Also, one little interesting anecdote. It took us 8 months to sell into the CIA. For a brand new, cutting edge technology, it took us 19 months on average to sell into a Fortune 500. And so, again, the European companies are going to be more behind, but everybody's struggling to adopt this substantially. The type of technical debt that companies have in terms of that messy data you mentioned will be a drag for a long time, which is why I think a lot of companies are looking into vendors like an OpenAI or an Anthropic, as opposed to building stuff in-house, which from what I saw had a really terrible track record.
So what I'd love to do is just ask the final question that came in. The student had to leave early, but it really is a question we talked about preparing for. And this is a great final question before I open up the breakout room. So at least we have a few minutes, and that is, what skills or experience do you think students can focus on before they get into the workforce to better prepare for the use of AI in the field? And in particular, if there's anything that you remember regarding things that we offer through the Trachtenberg School, would be fantastic. But if not, if there's other things that you recommend outside, it's also wonderful to hear.
Denise, could I piggyback on that question?
Yeah, just really quickly, Bill, because we're
really quickly. This is such a great brain trust you've assembled. Should we offer a class in this? And if so, would you please design the syllabus for me? And will you do a guest lecture for me? What a great foursome here. Seriously, I would really like to push us along beyond just introducing people to here's some go out and try some of this AI. What do you think? Following up on that question, what should we be doing and what should we be encouraging? Or is it throw up our hands?
From a skill set, all I can say is that you never know what's going to come down the next street that you go down. And so, never feeling like you're too old to learn something new is probably critical. I'm in my mid 40s. And so trying to force my brain to learn new skills, but it is, it's like, I'm still curious. I was lucky enough to continue to go to school throughout my whole life. So I've stayed curious, but I work in a very anti-intellectual field. The military is not known for intellectuals. And so it's being willing to do the research on your own, because I don't think you're ever going to get OJT or on the job training that's going to give you all of the skill sets that you're going to need to stay one step ahead. And that's my thing, is that just never stop being curious and keep on reading like you're a medical doctor that's trying to stay abreast of the latest medical treatments for the field that you're in, type thing. And then, Bill, I would love to design a class and then maybe teach it for GW if you want me to.
Awesome.
I also like to add maybe good solid foundation for econometrics and statistics would be great help. And at the same time, maybe not mastering, but at the same time, be comfortable with at least one programming language like R or Stata. And like I did my dissertation of the whole data using Stata, but after graduation, it was so expensive. So I moved into programming R, but the learning curve was so steep and then so high, and then like by the time I finishing my R practice, like people were like hype. There's a like, oh, Python is the new language. So like I was really confused, like what programming language should I focus on? But if you are like mastering or be comfortable with at least one programming language, you can develop like based on that skill, you can develop another one. And these days, even ChatGPT can like better, they're better coder than I. So I am. So yeah, but be curious and do not be intimidated by all these programming language. And I like to add like one last point, just maybe the importance of keeping an open mind. And like I encourage like all the students not limit their interest to a single field. You know, like I majored in urban and social policy, but who knows that I ended up doing the science and technology field. So like, which I never imagined it, but all the core principles that I learned in like in my urban and social policy and Trachtenberg School, like equity, social justice, and community engagement, all those are core principles are incredibly important in AI field. So yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and
it.
I'll just one more thing. It's to kind of amplify everyone's messages. So technical foundation, sure, that's incredibly important being in this space. But I think we're at sort of a watershed moment where we're leapfrogging. So back in the day when I was going through my college and my master's curriculum, and so if we wanted to head into data science and AI, to Rosa's point, you have that technical expertise and have that coding. Now on the other side, I think what's really critical is to also have the humanities aspects too, and be a good communicator, both written and verbal. And so, as Ken was mentioning before with prompt engineering, if you don't know how to kind of string together a coherent sentence, you can't really prompt the algorithms or the engines to be able to give you the output that you want. And so that efficiency and proficiency in being able to communicate effectively in whatever language, whether it's English or French or other things, is incredibly important in that respect as well. So being a well-rounded lifelong learner is really the only way to continue to be able to evolve and be able to be in lockstep with whatever technologies are going to come to the forefront. Right now it's AI and Gen AI. Last year was like blockchain. Previous years, other things, the technologies can continue to evolve. We don't know what's next. We don't even know what's 5 years down the line, but the opportunity to always be a problem solver and be able to be curious and just want to learn is really what's going to make us most effective for the future.
That disposition for change, I think, is critical. In 5-10 years down the road, it's quantum computing. And that scares me more than anything, because really what we're dealing with is not, and I see a lot of business owners fall into this fallacy of like, man, things are disrupted. I just need to get to the new normal, and then I can have another decade of just kind of chilling. That's not going to happen. Quantum is going to accelerate things far more than generative AI has. And so even getting to the point where we're comfortable with change, that's not something anybody really likes, but that, and that really piggybacks off of the critical thinking. Stringing together sentences, I mean, but even the ability to ask questions underneath that. I'm routinely amazed at how much, for whatever reason, I mean, the younger people I work with don't want to ask questions. And if they are incapable of doing that, they're just not going to be able to use these tools effectively. Inquisition more than answering is going to be the skill of the time. And finally, on a more practical note, I would say IBM's data science professional certificate. You can do it over the course of 1 to 2 years. Everybody I work with that's in a master's program, I say your master's program is behind. The pace of change outside of institutions is surpassing the pace of adaptation within those institutions. It is now on every individual to cover that gap, to close that gap on your own, and developing a parallel study of school tools and practice, not just statistics in an academic context, but statistics in a, how do I interpret these results more practically? And so I highly advise, it's like $40 a month on Coursera. I don't need to do data science in my job, but I need to interpret the results. I need to help them troubleshoot. And that would be critical. It has a bit of vendor lock into it, but you at least get familiar with the terminology. And in the end, I think what holds so many people back is just they're scared of how big and broad it is. All a feature is in data science is just the name of your row and what it has in relation. Now, I mean, obviously, it's a bit reductionist, but I mean, so much of it comes down to the specific terminology that people pull in and how scary it is if you don't have some kind of technical background, that it feels unattainable and reachable, and just getting it in that more practical and getting, you know, used to the language. Just like if you were in economics or international affairs, I've seen have a really high ROI on people's confidence in using these tools.
This is absolutely fantastic. I cannot thank all of you enough. I think we've barely scratched the surface. And as you both were just saying to both Jennifer and Ken, to wrap up, I'm going to say we have a lot more questions, and that's exciting. And that's really exciting. So thank you, the alumni, tremendously. This was absolutely fantastic. Thank you.